The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoke and gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey.
In the rain.
Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoke and gasoline. It's just a
I know how to
ghost
do it.
of you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. How you doing, brother? How's everybody doing tonight?
Tonight is going to be an interesting show because on tonight's episode, we are going to be talking about hell. Basically, what this show is going to be about is eyewitness accounts of hell. And you might say, whoa, eyewitness accounts of hell, that doesn't make any sense. That's crazy talk. But what this is people that have died and claim to have gone to hell and came back to life. They were brought back. And it is their experiences in hell. And also on this episode, I'm going to tell my story of dying, when I died and what I saw. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get to it. So the first one is Angie Fenimore. Now, Angie Fenimore attempted suicide in January of 1991. And she claims that she visited hell before she was saved and brought back. First, all she saw was endless darkness. And she saw a group of a bunch of other young people. And she referred to all those young people as the suicides. So I assume that those are people, other people that had also committed suicide. They were all together in one group in hell. She also spent time in a different part of hell, where lost souls rambled through a field. And they were just miserable. I mean, completely miserable. Too much, in fact, to even interact with one another. Fenimore, since the time when she died and went to hell and came back, since then she has been named Her Royal Majesty Princess Angie Fenimore, the Divine Royal of Utah, and the Prophetess of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So she's a Mormon and pretty high up in the church. And she said that she went to hell, she committed suicide, was stuck with a bunch of other people that committed suicide. And she also got to visit another part of hell where there was a field and a bunch of people were wandering around miserable. So that's Angie's account of hell. The next one is going to be Jennifer Perez. In May of 1997, Jennifer Perez nearly died after a group of her friends had drugged her soda, and they tried to sexually assault her. Perez was hospitalized for 3 days, where she slipped in and out of consciousness. During this time when she was in and out, Perez claims that she actually floated out of her body, and she was first led to heaven, but didn't get in there, so then she was taken to hell. And this is her account. I'm actually going to read her account to you. When we stopped, I opened my eyes, and I was standing on a great road. I didn't know where it led to, but the first thing that I felt, there was thirst. I was really thirsty. I kept telling the angel, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty. But it was like he didn't even hear me. I started to cry, and when the tears ran down my cheeks, they completely evaporated. There was a smell of sulfur, like burning tires. I tried to cover my nose, but that made it even worse. All my 5 senses were very sensitive. When I tried to cover myself, I could smell the sulfur even more. Also, all those little hairs on my arms, they just disappeared. I felt all the heat. It was very hot. Now, Perez witnessed people being tortured by demons, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't do anything to save them. And after she was given this glimpse of hell, she was led back to heaven, where God gave her a second chance and brought her back to life. This next account comes from Matthew Botsford. Now, Matthew was shot in the back of the head outside a restaurant in March of 1992. To save his life, doctors actually put him into a medically induced coma, and that coma lasted for 27 days. Botsford claimed to have spent that time that he was in a coma, the 27 days, shackled and hanging over a pit of magma, and being tormented by terrifying 4-legged creatures that would devour his flesh, only to have it grow back, and then it was devoured again. However, he says that worse than all these torments was the profound loneliness and isolation he felt, because everybody in hell is completely and totally alone. He says that eventually a gigantic hand pulled him out, and a voice said, "It's not your time." This next one is Dr. George Ritchie, and this took place in December of 1943. Dr. George Ritchie was suffering from pneumonia. It got really, really bad, and he ended up dying for 9 minutes. Now, Ritchie claims when he was dead that his spirit rose from his hospital bed, and he was able to look down at his own dead body before Jesus came and escorted him through a tour of the afterlife. One section of hell was reserved for people who can never fulfill their longings. So they long for things, they really want things, and they can never have them. He saw dead people in a bar desperately grasping for drinks, but they couldn't get a hold of them. Smokers were desperately reaching out for cigarettes, but they couldn't grab them. In another part of hell, Ritchie saw a huge battle that was taking place among the souls of the dead, with endless physical violence and terrible, terrible perverse sexual acts. This next gentleman is Howard Storm. Now, Howard Storm was a diehard atheist until he nearly died from a perforated stomach in June of 1985. He woke up in his hospital bed and realized that he was a ghost. He says that a group of figures led him into a dark hallway that was filled with a very thick fog. He said he followed the figures as they retreated further down the hallway, and he was struggling to keep up with them. Eventually, these shadowy demons began eating his flesh. As he was tormented, a voice in his head told him to pray to God. Though Storm had never prayed before, he did the best that he could. And that prayer that he said ended up saving his life. And after his near-death experience, Storm has become a United Church of Christ minister. So he is an atheist no longer. This next one is Tamra Laro. Now, Tamra is 15 years old, and in September 1985, she attempted suicide by shooting herself in the chest. After pulling the trigger, she found herself in a fiery pit where hundreds of souls were screaming in agony, and they could not talk to one another, even though that they were crowded all together in the pit. Laro also says that she saw a creature with dragon-like heads, more fierce than anything the earth has ever seen, and that's a quote from her. Then a shining hand descended and carried her up to heaven, before depositing her in her own home once again. Laro survived because the bullet missed her heart by 1/4 of an inch, and now dedicates her life to teaching others about the truth of hell. Now, what's interesting about this story is this is the second story so far where a giant hand has come down into hell and grabbed the person and taken them back up to heaven. So now you have 2 eyewitness accounts with the exact same thing happening. Kind of interesting. This next one is Father Jose Manayangat. In April 1985, the father was hit by a drunk driver and nearly died. He claims that he saw heaven, hell, and purgatory during his near-death experience. He says that hell is about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and filled with souls that are screaming in agony. He also says that there are 7 levels of hell, and you are assigned to a level based on the severity of the sins you have committed. Interestingly, he claims to have seen fellow priests and bishops that were suffering in hell. Many of them were there because they had misled the people with false teaching and a bad example. That's what he said. This next one is Bill Weiss. Now, Bill claims to have visited hell even though he didn't have a near-death experience. So this is a very different one because he didn't die and go to hell. He just claims that he visited hell while he was alive. Weiss was a devout Christian who lived a normal, peaceful life. And on November 28, 1998, at exactly 3 a.m., he was suddenly plunged into hell. He describes being trapped in a 15-foot by 10-foot cell with giant, foul-smelling reptile human creatures who attacked him. At last, he woke up in his own bed again at 3:23 a.m. and dedicated his life to spreading the word that hell is real. This next one is a Polish nun named Sister Faustina. Now, Sister Faustina claims to have visited hell in 1936. She wrote about the experience in her diary, where she described hell as one torture after another, from eternal darkness to a terrible, suffocating smell. However, the worst torments are psychological, the perpetual remorse of conscience and the loss of hope, she says. In addition to this great despair, there are caves and grottos equipped with special tortures designed for different kinds of sinners. I would have died at the very sight of these tortures, she writes, if God had not supported me. Now, this is interesting because this is yet another example of somebody claiming that there are different punishments for different sins, or different levels for different types of sin or amounts of sin. Now, another nun, Sister Josefina Menendez, claims that she visited hell several times over the course of her short life. In 1922 and 1923, right before she died, she wrote about her experiences in hell, which included being squeezed between burning planks, getting pierced by red-hot irons, and constantly smelling the putrid scent of burning flesh. In her account, she writes, "A sickening stench asphyxiates and corrupts everything. It is like the burning of putrefied flesh, mingled with tar and sulfur, a mixture to which nothing on earth can be compared." Menendez died at the age of 33 after God led her on many terrible visits to hell. Now, what I wonder with her, why did God send her to hell? But she doesn't say that it was from a near-death experience. So what I wonder is, why did God send her to hell? Was it maybe just to witness it and to spread the word to everybody else that it's real and what happens there? I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like there's 2 of these in this grouping that it seems kind of weird because it doesn't have to include them dying to go to hell. It's like they were alive and for whatever reason God just decided to send them to hell, which seems pretty mean. In my opinion, I mean, that's not very fun. Now, there's been a lot of other accounts of people that have died and went to hell. I remember reading one account where this guy had an accident and he ended up in the hospital. He died in the hospital. I believe he went into a coma and then he died shortly. And he said that he was standing over top of his hospital bed. And he said these people came and they told him to come with them. He could look down and see his body, so he knew he was dead. So he went with the people, and they were very pleasant and nice and talking to him and everything at first. As they walked down the hallway turned into a long cave-like corridor, and it just kept going and going and going, and it got darker and darker. It got to the point where it was almost pitch black, but for whatever reason, this man could still see everything. But he was aware of the fact that it was black. He was also aware that the attitudes of the people that were taking him along this corridor had changed. They were no longer being nice to him. They were no longer kind and loving. Now they were indifferent. They didn't talk to him at all. And no matter how much he talked to them, they just would not answer him. So they kept leading him down this corridor. As they went, he could not see any end to the corridor. He looked back behind him, and he couldn't see where he had come from either. So the corridor seemed to stretch on infinitely in both directions. After a little while longer of walking, the man said that instead of being indifferent, the people that were taking him down the corridor started being cruel to him. They started making fun of him and calling him names and saying mean and horrible things to him. This lasted for a little bit of time until they began to actually physically assault him. It began with just pokes and pushes and shoves, and then it graduated into punches and kicks. Before very long, they were pulling his hair and biting him, ripping away hunks of his flesh. He said that he stood there screaming in agony as the demons ripped open his belly and started pulling out his organs and eating them. As soon as he was emptied out, the demons would look at him and laugh, because by this point they were no longer people. They looked like demons. Whatever disguise they had that made them look like people had faded away, and now he could see them for what they truly were, which was demons. After he was emptied out of all of his organs, after they had ripped them all from his body, they just took a step back and smiled at him with his blood and chunks of his organs dripping from their mouth. He said that almost instantly all of his organs grew back, and the skin of his belly was no longer busted open or cut open or ripped. It was whole again. And he said that the demons would laugh, and then they would rip into him once again and begin ripping out his internal organs and eating them and ripping them up and throwing them around and just playing with them and having a grand old time. He said that this went on for quite some time. And then when he thought he could not take it anymore, when he thought that he would lose his mind, it all stopped. He felt himself being pulled backwards through the corridor from where he had come. He was moving faster and faster until he reached an incredible speed that he felt like his whole body would just break apart. He was traveling so quickly. Then suddenly he popped back out into the light, and he was back in the hospital room, back inside his own body. Now, before the man had the accident, he didn't believe in God. He didn't believe in the devil. He didn't believe in anything like that. But after his experience, he became a devout Christian and studied his Bible every day. And now he goes around giving speeches and telling young people about God and about the experiences that he had on his way to hell. Very interesting, a lot of these stories, because you wonder if it's just people making things up or if it's something real, because there's a lot of these stories. Now, there's dozens and dozens and dozens more, but I'm not going to go through every single one of the stories on the show. I just wanted to give you a few of them. It makes me wonder if this is a real thing or if it is something that people are either making up or it's what they expect to see, so it's what they do see. I don't know. It's very interesting to me. I don't think that they're making it up. I don't think that it's something that is completely untrue. I think it's something that they experienced. Now, whether that means that they died and went to hell or whether that just means that they were close to death and their brain was doing funny things, I can't tell you for sure. But in my personal opinion, I think that they probably went to hell, a lot of them. That's what they're experiencing and what their vision of hell was. Now, I want to tell you a story of something that happened in my life. Something that's personal to me. Now, I did not die and go to hell, but I did have a near-death or after-death experience. I'm not sure which. It happened when I was young. I was in high school at the time. And down here by where I live, there's a place called Gypsy Falls. Now, what Gypsy Falls is a cliff that has a waterfall beside it. It's a small waterfall, but it's a waterfall. And underneath of the cliff, there are several different rocks and a bunch of water. So we used to go down there a lot to go swimming. because the water was ice cold all the time. So even on the hottest of days, you could go down there and jump in that water and it would be ice cold and it would just be refreshing. So one night, me and a good friend of mine, we picked up a couple of girls and we decided that we wanted to go skinny dipping with these females. Now, we had been drinking a little bit, but we drank all the time, so we weren't as drunk as we normally were. But we had had a few beers. So we decided that we're going to go down to Gypsy Falls and go skinny dipping at night. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning, in between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning when we got down to Gypsy Falls, somewhere in that range. We pulled up. To get to Gypsy Falls, you pull off of the main road onto a dirt like driveway thing. And then it's a short walk through the woods to get to Gypsy Falls. And once you get there, there's a path that leads down around away from the waterfall. Because the path heads towards the waterfall and then turns at the waterfall and kind of circles down and around to get down to the water where you can actually get in and go swimming. This was a time before there were cell phones. Cell phones did not exist then. They had some of the mobile phones and the car phones, but they were the ones that were the gigantic bag. It looked like a tote bag that you carried the phone in. And mobile phones looked like some kind of military walkie-talkie at the time, and they were insanely expensive. They were multiple thousands of dollars. And I did not have a lot of money back then. So none of us had phones at all. We also did not have a flashlight with us because we were teenagers and we hadn't planned on, running around in the woods in the dark. It was one of those things where we met up with some girls and we decided on the fly that, hey, we're going to go down to Gypsy Falls to go skinny dipping because we want to get these women naked. That was the plan. So we pull off the main road into the dirt driveway and we get out of the car, and I very confidently looked at all three of them and I said, "Follow me. I know exactly where I'm going. I've been down here a lot of different times." So we start walking through the woods and they're following behind me. And I realize as I'm walking through the woods that I can't see where the hell I'm going. Now, I was a smoker at the time, so I did have a lighter. But I did not pull my lighter out to try to light my way. I don't know why I didn't. It would have made perfect sense, but for whatever reason, I just did not think of it at the time. So we're walking through the woods there, the dark woods, and I can barely see anything. I mean, I can see a little bit, enough not to run into a tree, but literally it's maybe a foot in front of my face is all I can see, and I can't make that out very well either. So we're walking, and I remember thinking that I needed to start paying close attention because enough time had passed that we should be getting near the turn where I need to turn to go down, to walk down around so I could get to the water. I remember thinking that the cliff would be coming up soon, so I needed to start paying attention to where I was walking because very soon I would end up around where the cliff was and I didn't want to miss that turn. Right as I was thinking of that, I felt that there was not ground underneath my feet anymore. I had taken a step and there was no ground to put my foot on. I lost my balance and I went forwards, and I felt myself falling through the air. I realized as I was falling that I had indeed come to the cliff and I had walked right off the cliff. I remember falling, and I remember it wasn't really pain, but it was just a hot burning kind of sensation as my head hit a rock. And then I remember the ice cold water. I remember slamming into that water and sinking down. Now, one thing that you need to know about Gypsy Falls before I go any further in this story is that there have been many people over the years that have died here at Gypsy Falls. Because for whatever reason, there's a weird suction underneath there. Because you have the falls and you have your swimming hole there. But if you swim down in the swimming hole and over to the side a little bit, there's like a little cave area there. And for whatever reason, maybe the churning of the water when it hits coming off the falls, but for some reason there's some kind of undertow there. There's a suction that will suck people up underneath the falls into that cave. And it's very hard to get back out of there once you get sucked in, and a lot of people drown. So there's been multiple people over the years that have gotten sucked under and died there at Gypsy Falls. So it's not a place that they really like you to go. But I was young, I was rebellious, I didn't care what anybody else wanted me to do or what they thought. And I had two hot chicks with me, and we were hoping to see them naked. That's why we were skinny dipping. So I could really care less about how dangerous Gypsy Falls was at the time. Now, once I hit the water, it was very, very cold. And I was still wearing everything I had on. I had my leather jacket on, I had my t-shirt on, my pants, my boots, everything. Because I was not expecting to be in the water yet. I was expecting to walk down the path and then get undressed and go into the water. But I walked right off the cliff, so I fell. Now I remember being under the water, and I remember that's when the pain started in my head. What was at first a burning sensation had turned into a throbbing pain. It sucked. That's the only way I can describe it. It absolutely sucked. It hurt like hell. I remember that I was kind of confused, and I couldn't tell which way was up and which way was down. Now, they teach you to look for the bubbles. Whenever you take like a swimming class or a scuba class or anything like that, they teach you, if you ever become disorientated underneath the water, to just watch your bubbles. When you exhale, watch the bubbles, and they always go up. So all you have to do is follow the bubbles. I wish I would have remembered that at the time, but I didn't. I was having trouble concentrating. I was having trouble thinking straight. I remember my chest started burning, and I felt like my lungs were about to explode if I didn't breathe. So I had the pain in my head, I had the pain in my lungs, and it was very, very cold. Even colder than normal at Gypsy Falls. Because Gypsy Falls, the water, like I said, is always cold. But for whatever reason, it felt way colder than usual. I remember all those uncomfortable things, all that pain, and then all of a sudden, all the pain was gone. It was all gone. I didn't hurt anymore. It was no longer dark. Everything was lit up around me. Very bright. I no longer felt like I was in water. I wasn't cold anymore. I was comfortable. And I felt like I was floating, but not in water, in air. I was just floating there in air. And I also remember that my lungs didn't hurt anymore. They didn't feel like they were about to explode because I was now breathing normally. I was breathing in and out, not water, but air. And I was in no discomfort at all. I was completely fine, calm, happy. Everything was wonderful. No pain. And I remember thinking for a second, what the hell is going on? I just fell off the cliff and hit my head. I know I hit my head because I felt it. And I was in the water. What the hell's going on? It was nighttime. And now it's bright. I mean, just super bright. It didn't make any sense to me. And the fact that I could breathe when I know damn well I was underwater. The fact that I could breathe again was strange. And I began to panic a little bit. I began to kind of freak out. Because I didn't know what was going on. It didn't make any sense. I'm a guy that puts a lot of stock in logic, fact, things I can reach out and grab a hold of. This made absolutely no sense to me. I could not understand what had happened and why I could breathe again, why I didn't hurt anymore, why it was completely bright instead of pitch black. It made no sense. This only went on for a couple seconds. And I remember before I could really figure out what was going on, I felt a presence behind me. I wanted to turn and look at whatever it was that was behind me. Whatever I felt, that presence, I wanted to turn and look at it. I wanted to see what was coming up behind me. Because my whole life I've been a fighter. I've been a guy that when someone sneaks up behind me, I automatically think the worst. I automatically think that I'm getting ready to be attacked. So I have to spin around. I have to face my attacker. I have to fight that threat and destroy it. That's how I've always been. But even though I wanted to turn around, and even though I needed to turn around to see what was behind me, I couldn't move. I was frozen in place. The presence got closer to me, and I felt a pair of arms wrap around me from behind and hold me. They embraced me. They hugged me close. No words were spoken. It just held me. And I remember at that moment, all the panic that was inside of me just washed away. It was like I was completely full and somebody just pulled the plug and it all just drained out. In place of that panic and that fear that I was beginning to feel was an unbelievable sense of calm and joy and love. I have never in my life felt love like that. I have never in my life felt that kind of joy and that kind of acceptance. And that's the other part of it, was the acceptance. I mean, I felt like no matter what I've done in my life, no matter how bad I was, no matter how big of a piece of garbage that I had been in my life, and at that time I was not the guy that I am now. I was not a good guy. You know, I was a guy that would beat you into hamburger on the street if you looked at me wrong. I was not nice. And no matter how much of a prick I was, and no matter what kind of bad things I had done in my life, I felt like it really didn't matter anymore. I felt completely accepted and loved unconditionally for what I am. And I had never in my life experienced that before. Not that level of love. Now, I came from a great family. My mother and my father and my brother, they loved me what I thought was unconditionally. They would die for me in a heartbeat. So I had a wonderful, loving, great family. But even as great as my family was, even as much as my parents had loved me in my life, it didn't even compare to the level of love that I felt from this presence that was behind me. Now, as I stood there and I was being held, I got the feeling that it was a male presence that was holding me. I can't tell you exactly why I felt that way, because I was looking straight ahead. I couldn't even look down at the arms that were holding me to see what they looked like. I tried, but I wasn't able to move. So I can't tell you that I knew that it was a male presence because of the arms or because of any other reasons. I just felt like it was. It just felt to me like it was a male presence behind me. And I remember I never wanted to leave. I wanted to stay right there, exactly the way it was, forever. I had never been so happy. I had never felt so loved and accepted and just good. I never felt so good in my entire life. The presence behind me spoke to me at that point. But spoke to me isn't really the right words. Because even though I clearly heard what the person said, they never actually spoke any words. It was as if that person that was behind me, holding me, it was as if they could speak directly into my mind without my ears having to pick it up. So the words were never actually spoken. They weren't audible outside, but I could hear them inside of my own head. Almost like when you have a thought, when you talk to yourself in your mind, but it wasn't me that was saying the words. It was coming from somebody else. The words that were spoken to me were, you have to go back. Now, I had never in my life received such terrible news. I was not at all happy about the idea of going back. I did not want to leave this place. I did not want to leave those arms. Inside of my mind, I begged. I pleaded. I yelled, I screamed, I cried. I did anything I thought I could to convince this person to let me stay. I didn't want to go. The presence behind me listened to all of my pleas, listened to me rant and rave and threaten and scream and beg silently. And then when I was finished, it simply repeated, "You have to go back." As soon as the presence repeated that for the second time, I felt cold again. And a split second later, I burst up from the water as if I was swimming desperately towards the surface. My head came up out of the water, and I gasped a breath of air. Now, when I took that deep breath of air, I got a little bit of water with it, which caused me to cough and hack and spit water for a little bit. Another thing that I noticed besides the cold was my head hurt again. Somehow I managed to swim my way over to the rocks. Now, swim may not be the right word, because it was more like a desperate float doggy paddle thing. I don't know. I'm a unbelievable swimmer. I'm a really good swimmer. But I wasn't able to swim properly at that moment. So I did what I could, and I made my way over to the rocks at the base of the path. I pulled myself up, and I sat there for a minute, trying to catch my breath and trying to figure out what the hell had just happened to me. It was at this moment that I remembered that I had a lighter in my pocket, because I needed to try to find my way back up the path. But I was afraid of falling back down into the water, because I didn't feel like I had almost any energy left at all. I felt drained. I dug in my pocket and I pulled this lighter out, and I started trying to light the lighter so that I could see to go up the path. Now, in my mind, for whatever reason, I couldn't put together logically that the lighter was not going to light, because I had been under the water, so it was soaking wet. And my cigarettes were soaking wet. Everything was soaking wet. I was wet, wet, wet. So the lighter would not light at all. I couldn't even get really a spark out of it. I remember that I started to yell for my friend and the girls that were up on the top of the path where the cliff was. I began to yell for them. And at first, there was no answer. And then I yelled again. And my friend that was standing up there yelled back down to me. But his voice didn't sound right because he had been crying. He ended up pulling his lighter out and using it to make his way down the path and get me and bring me back up to the path. He helped me back to the car, and we sat there for a little while I tried to recover and get my head together enough to drive home. While we were sitting there in the car, he told me that he thought that I was dead. And I remember being confused by this, because I said, "What do you mean? I just fell off the cliff. I hit, and that was it. And then I came back." I did not tell him about what I had experienced, because I didn't know if he would believe me, and I didn't want, at that time when you're a teenager, I mean, you don't want people to make fun of you. You don't want to be the butt of anybody's joke. And a story like this, I thought would definitely make me sound crazy. So I did not share what had happened to him. And I never told anybody about this until many, many years later. And I still haven't told a whole lot of people. It's only a few people that I've actually told this story to. And now I guess everybody listening. So eventually I guess millions of people will probably hear this story, but that's all right. Because I'm okay with telling it, because I don't care anymore if people think I'm crazy, because I know what happened. But I remember being confused, because I thought, well, I wonder how long I was gone, because to me, I imagined since I was underwater, it must have all taken place in the span of a second or two. What felt like a long time to me in my mind was probably only a second or two, because I could not have survived that long underneath the water. I would have drowned. He told me that I had been under the water for like 10 or 15 minutes. He said it was a long time. It was so long that they had thought that I had died. And the girls got scared and freaked out, and they left. They actually made their way out and walked home, because they didn't want to be there, because they thought I was dead, and they didn't want to get in any trouble, so they took off. He had not left me. He had sat there, and he had begun to cry because he didn't know what to do. He did not, I hadn't come back up, and he was afraid that I was dead, and he didn't know what to do about it. He didn't know if he should go in the water and try to find my body and bring it out, or if he should try to walk out of there and go find help. I had the car keys in my pocket because it was my car. So he would have had to walk home. And he didn't know if he should try to find someone to to come help, but by the time he could, it would have been too late anyway, and he thought maybe it was already too late. So he was really worried and freaking out and panicking. And he said when I came back up, it had been quite a while because he had argued with the girls to stay, and they had left anyway. And he had tried to convince them to bring back help, and they told them no, that they were going to pretend were never here because they didn't want to get in trouble and all this stuff. So it had been a little bit of time that had passed, and I hadn't come up. So to me, this was very strange because I wondered why I didn't drown. And then I began to think maybe I did. Maybe when I came up, when I thought that I had sucked in some water, when I tried to take a breath and it made me cough water out and hack and spit to get it all up and be able to breathe normally again, maybe I hadn't taken in water when I was coming up. Maybe I had taken in water while I was down there and I had actually died. And when I came up, I was spitting it back out. I was coughing up the water. Now that doesn't entirely sound possible to me. That sounds like it's something that could never happen. But then again, this whole story sounds to me like something that could never happen, and yet I know it did. So I can't really explain why I drowned and then was still able to swim up. Maybe I didn't fully die. Maybe it was some weird thing. I don't know. But I know that what happened to me was 100% real. I know that I am not making this story up. That makes me wonder about all these other people that have had experiences where they've died. And it runs the gamut from seeing a bright light and heading towards it to going to heaven and meeting God and Jesus and experiencing heaven, to some people go to hell and they experience that and they come back and they tell the tale. Now, I'm not going to say that any one of these people are lying, because I know that I myself have had an experience. Now, I don't exactly know where I went. I don't think that it was hell, because it wasn't unpleasant. And I don't think that you would feel that kind of love and acceptance in hell. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't hell. Now, that being said, I don't know if it was heaven either, because there were no pearly gates, there were no angels, there were no streets paved with gold or any of that. You know, any of the things that you would normally think of when you think of heaven, there was none of that. It was just a void. It was a big empty space without form. There were no walls, there was no floor, there was no nothing. I was just floating in emptiness. So I'm not exactly sure what that was. Maybe it was purgatory. Maybe that's the place that we all go when we die, until it's decided whether we're going to heaven or hell. Maybe that's like the waiting room that we go to. Who knows? But that's where I went, wherever it was. And to this day, and this has been 30 some years ago, or 20 some years ago, almost 30 years ago. But to this day, I can still recall it in vivid detail. I can still almost feel that feeling of love and acceptance and joy that I felt then. And ever since that day, I have desperately longed for that feeling once again. Now, I can only hope that one day, when I die, that I will return. Not necessarily to that place, but just to those arms. That I can return to that feeling of love and acceptance and joy and contentment. I hope that one day I am able to find my way back there. And I hope that all of you are as well, because it was a truly wonderful experience. I would not recommend dying, but I did not have a bad experience at all. If I died. I think I must have. But I can't tell you for sure, because it wasn't like I was in a hospital where there was a flat line and I was pronounced dead or anything like that. The story is what the story is. I have told you the events that took place exactly as they took place. I have neither embellished nor left anything out. So I will leave it to you, listeners, to judge for yourselves. Decide in your own minds what happened to me that day. Did I die and go to purgatory or heaven? Or was it just the feverish workings of a confused and injured mind? Because I did hit my head on the way down. I don't know. I know what I believe. I believe that I died that day. I believe that I went to probably purgatory. And I believe that the person that came up behind me, I believe that that person was most likely Jesus Christ. Because only Jesus could love you like that. So that's what I think probably happened to me. But notice I said probably because I don't know for sure. I can't tell you 100%. And if you've listened to these shows with me, if you've been on this journey with me for a while, you know that I always try to deal in absolutes. I try to find the facts. I try to solve the mysteries. This is one mystery that I think I might have solved. I think I have the solution. I think I know inside my own mind what happened that day. But I guess I won't know for sure until I die again. And as much as I enjoyed that experience and as much as I miss that love, there are a lot of people here on earth that I love dearly. And there are a lot of people here on earth that need me. So I hope that I won't be going away again too very soon. I hope that I have a lot more years left on this earth because there are so many things I want to see. There's so many people that I love that I want to see what happens to them in life. I want to see my nieces and nephews grow up. I want to see weddings in the future and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I want to see all those things. So hopefully I'll be around for it. You never know. I didn't plan on dying that day, and I'm sure that I won't plan on dying the next time. I don't think really a lot of us do, but it happens. So if there's one thing I will tell you, it's love the people that you're with, man. Love your family, love your friends, love everybody. Because life is too short for hate. Life is too short for anger and bitterness. And believe me, when you die, none of that matters anymore anyway. None of it does. When I died, I wasn't thinking of the people that had wronged me. I wasn't thinking of any anger or any people that I hated or disliked. I wasn't thinking of this person that slighted me in this way or that. Or I wasn't thinking of any of that. None of that mattered anymore. When you die, you just kind of let all that go. So I say let it go now while you're still alive and enjoy yourself. Live your life. Enjoy it. Because we only have one. Or in some of our cases, two.
And thank you, brother. That was a very interesting stories you were telling, especially the one about yourself. You've told me that one before, and I'm glad you made it because I wouldn't be doing a show with you right now. And plus, just glad you made it all together, because you're a wonderful guy. And those books would have never got written either. So some of the stories you were talking about, I've heard about them. Like the guy who was stuck, he fell asleep. He didn't die. And he went to hell for a couple, like 23 minutes, and he's stuck in a cage. And he said that the demons, they hate us because, we're supposed to be in God's image. And that's why they hate us so much, and they did cruel things. And they were like ugly, lizard-looking creatures that looked like just ugly things. And ugliest things you can imagine, dragon-looking, reptilian things, demons. And they would torture you, cut you up, tear your pieces, your body parts. And you would scream, and your body would re-heal itself, and they would do all over. Because in hell, there's no liquid. Like he was saying, the lady was crying, and her tears would turn to vapor. That's because blood's liquid. There's no blood in you. It would just be your stomach, your intestines, your kidneys, your hearts, your liver, your lungs would be poured out, and you'd be in agonizing pain. But then you re-heal yourself, and the demons would do it all again to torture you. Now, when he was talking about one of the ladies, I think it was one of the sisters, that 7 levels of hell came from Dante's Inferno. He wrote a book and paintings about 7 levels of hell, from the beginning of hell all the way to the very bottom with the devil himself. And that's where I think she got that story. Some of these I don't believe, and I'm going to say is, especially the ones when the people are saying they're dreaming. Because you dream, I've dreamed stuff, so that's explainable. And some of these other ones are not. Like people who died and got stuck in hell, and they saw like I've read a story where this lady died and she saw the Pope, Michael Jackson, the guy from the Beatles, John Lennon was there. All these famous people that Frank Sinatra were all in hell being tortured in different ways, like. Ones were tortured by demons. Other ones were tortured by like James was saying earlier about something you want, but you can never get it. And you're always right there, but it just gets taken away from you. If you're greedy with money, You get you get your body slammed with stones, and you get your body torn apart. Then it happens again and again to the end of time. Just crazy different tortures would happen to you, and that's what that Dante Inferno came from. And I'll tell you a story about me. I was about 6, 7 years old, 5 or 6, sorry, in Pennsylvania. And I had to move because I was always sick. I got pneumonia, bronchitis, and I had pneumonia for real bad, double pneumonia, and I got stuck in the hospital. And at that time, I was in an oxygen tent because I could hardly breathe. And I got it 2 different times. Well, 2 times I stopped breathing for at least a minute or 2. And I don't remember anything. I didn't see anything. I just know it was dark. That's all I can remember. It was a long time ago, almost 30 years ago, 31. So I'm not going to remember everything, but I do have a photographic memory. And I know people are going to think I'm crazy, but I can remember things since I was a baby. And I've proven it to my mom and stuff. They trip out that I still remember. So I have a photographic memory. And I also, there's only a couple, 5% at Dream and Keller, and I'm one of them. I have seen things when I was asleep. I could see my body, and I see things attacking me. I would have dreams of demons and stuff, so I can imagine what hell's really about and how crazy it is. But then I've read other stories that hell isn't what people think. Yeah, it's got bad things, but it's not like fire everywhere. It's just kind of purgatory. And that's what I think anyway, is people are in purgatory to the end of, to God comes down to the rafters, if you believe that. And that's when you go to hell. But I think my opinion is on this all is it could be possibility. I'm not going to sit here and say everybody's lying or they're not telling the truth. They probably did have these things and these visions, or they when they were dead. The only problem I have with it is there's other people who have said they've seen nothing. And there's other people who have seen other things. So, I mean, when you're dead, you really could be in a dream state before you die, like how you dream like when you're sleeping. And I've dreamed some crazy things. If I could remember half the dreams I had, they were insane. And there was some good dreams. That's another story we need to do one day. Maybe we'll get into dreams and stuff like that. But my personal opinion is that the hell dreams, or they died and saw hell, there's probably some truth to that, and there's probably some could have been in a dream state. And some people who said they saw hell and they woke up and they could be telling the truth and there could not be. I don't know. And I believe James's story about what he saw. I believe that. I'm not going to say he's lying. Some of the people I'm going to question, and some of them I wouldn't. But what I've dealt with my past with demons is, it's possibility. It's a very much possibility. I've seen stuff that would make you change your whole thoughts on everything. But that's a different show. So I pretty much, I think it's possibility that some of this stuff is true, but I also believe some of I'm skeptical on it. I don't believe everything is true. I believe some people either had a dream and they thought that's what it is. Now, the one with the ladies recurring, going back to hell, that doesn't make any sense, because one time or maybe 2 times, but why would God keep on punishing somebody to keep going to hell after they've seen it once? Why would you want to see it any more times? That doesn't make any sense to me. That sounds like I don't believe it. But most of the stories I do believe. But I also have a different belief. So, I don't really want to get into that, but it's a big, I'll say a possibility on a lot of these. That's what I'm coming up with.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Some of these seem very possible to me. They seem like there's no parts of them that just scream out lie to me. And then some of them just kind of seem a little fishy. I'm never one that would say that somebody is out and out lying that's giving an eyewitness account like this, because how the hell do I know what they saw? But a couple of them are kind of I don't know. But then there's several of them in there that seem very, very plausible. So I would have to agree with you, old boy. I'd have to say that if I had to give a ruling, I would say that most of these are possible. Some of them are probable, and some of them I'm a little skeptical on. But like I said, I don't know. I can't prove or disprove any of them. So I can't give a 100% confirmed, verified yes, and I can't give a 100% no, they're full of crap, because there's no way for me to prove or disprove any of these. I know what my experience was. I know what I saw. And you know me. I mean, you know me personally, and you know me on the show, and you know that I do not lie. So if I'm telling you something happened, guys, it happened. I'm not the guy that's going to lie. I even tell the truth when it gets me in trouble, and that's quite a bit. I'm a married man, so you can imagine that a married man that tells the truth all the time is in trouble a lot, and I am in trouble a lot. You can ask old boy. Usually the line is, okay, dude, what did you do today? You know, what did you do wrong today? Because I'm always getting in trouble. But I would agree with you 100%. Some of these possible, some of them probably not, but who knows? As always, we'll let the audience decide. Okay, we are just about out of time, so old boy, if you want to go ahead and give your shout-outs, brother.
Thank you, brother. And I want to tell everybody that thanks for listening to us on Para X, and I love you all, and I appreciate every one of you for listening to us. I love doing these shows. I can't get enough of it. And I love making you guys listen to us and happy. And remember, check us out on James Hershey's YouTube page. So you can subscribe and you can listen to all our older shows and newer shows too. And remember, you only live once. Have a good night, Misfits, Sugar Ladies, and Demon Hunters. I love you all. Good night.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And if you want to check out the channel, it's www.youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. Just thanks for listening, man. We appreciate all the support. And until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. We love you. Bye-bye.
All these voices. All these voices, all these things you can't explain, all these painful memories, they keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the ghost of you and me, of you and me. All these whispers, all these footsteps in the rain, all these shadows in my mind, from my reflection I can't find. It's just the ghost of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the ghost of you and me, of you and me. Don't let them take you away. Don't let them bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let them bring you down.
I am horror author James Hershey Jr. from the Staring Into the Abyss radio show. Check out the book that started it all. What critics called the scariest book of the year. I Am Legion. And if you're still breathing, check out the other two books in the series. The Surrogate of Souls and The Rise of the Revenant. These books will scare the hell out of you. That I promise.